in an era where there are no more secrets. We have mapped the human genome. We know exactly how a star collapses into a black hole millions of light years away. We have more data in our pockets than ancient civilizations had in their grandest libraries. We know how the brain fires, how the oceans move, how the markets predict our next desire. We know everything. So why does it feel like we are carrying the weight of the entire universe on our shoulders? Why, with all this knowing, are we heavier than ever? Think about it. Information was supposed to set us free. We believed that if we just gathered enough facts, enough understanding, we would finally find peace. But look around. Look inside yourself. Every notification, every piece of news, every memory we refuse to let fade, it builds up. We have become hoarders of invisible things. We hold on to the past as if gripping it tighter will somehow change what happened. We hold on to the future as if worrying about it will magically give us control over it. We are exhausted, not from physical labor, but from the sheer gravity of grasping. I was thinking about this the other night. I realized I was carrying around an argument from 5 years ago, a ghost, just a sequence of electrical signals playing on a loop in my head, yet it felt like a physical weight on my chest, and it made me wonder, if you could physically see all the thoughts, the grudges, the expectations, and the identities you are holding on to right now, what would they look like? How much space would they take up in the room you are sitting in? The ancients knew a secret that we have systematically forgotten. In our modern world, we equate wisdom with accumulation, adding more degrees, more facts, more opinions. But true wisdom, the kind of wisdom that actually liberates you, is fundamentally about subtraction. There's a profound concept, Roo Laew Waang, knowing and letting go. It doesn't mean you become ignorant. It doesn't mean you stop caring or turn a blind eye to the world. You must know. You must look directly into the fire, see the pain, the truth, the mechanics of reality. But once you know, once the truth has served its purpose, you drop it. You don't carry the boat on your head after you've crossed the river. But we do, don't we? We drag these heavy wooden boats across dry land, wondering why our necks are breaking. We confuse holding on with loyalty. We confuse obsession with love. We confuse overthinking with intelligence. If I had to choose just one word to describe what we are all secretly searching for underneath all this accumulation, for me, it would be the word weightlessness. I wonder what word comes to your mind when you think about true, ultimate freedom. To understand how to actually achieve this weightlessness, how to truly drop the boat, we can't just look at psychology. We have to look at the architecture of reality itself, because this tendency to cling isn't just a human flaw. It is a cosmic pattern. Even the most massive stars in the universe eventually collapse because they can no longer sustain their own gravity. What happens in the absolute deepest, darkest corners of the universe is happening right now inside the neural pathways of your brain. The cosmos has a blueprint for letting go, and the moment you understand how it works, nothing will ever look the same again. When modern physicists talk about the multiverse, or when they debate whether our universe began with a big bang and will eventually collapse in a big crunch, we treat these as the cutting-edge discoveries of the 21st century. We look at the James Webb Space Telescope capturing the birth of galaxies, and we feel a sense of unprecedented modern triumph. But over 2.5 millennia ago, long before the first glass lens was ever crafted, a man sat in absolute stillness in northern India and described the exact same mechanics of the cosmos. If you look into the ancient texts, specifically a discourse called the Agany Sutta, you do not find a story of a universe created out of nothing in 7 days. You find something that sounds shockingly like modern astrophysics. The Buddha described a universe that is cyclical. It expands, it stabilizes, it contracts, and it dissolves, over and over again. Endless cycles of cosmic breathing. In the text, he describes a period where the universe contracts into deep darkness, a void of water and emptiness, before expanding again, where beings of pure light begin to consume the newly formed matter, becoming denser, heavier, and eventually bound to the earth. I have spent years looking at this ancient text alongside modern theories of an oscillating universe, and I will admit there is a gap in my own understanding here. I look at this concept of a universe constantly expanding and dying, being reborn only to die again, and it makes me wonder, if time is a cosmic circle, if galaxies are born just to collapse, what is the ultimate purpose of our brief moment in it? I have my theories, but I am absolutely certain there are people listening to this right now who have studied quantum mechanics or esoteric cosmology far deeper than I have. I would genuinely love to know how you connect these dots. In a universe that constantly destroys and rebuilds itself, how do you find meaning? It is a paradox I still wrestle with. But the Buddha didn't just map the physical universe of stars and void. He mapped the architecture of consciousness itself. He described 31 planes of existence. Think of them not as physical planets you could travel to in a spaceship, but as frequencies of reality. At the very bottom are the hell realms, dimensions of absolute density, pain, and heavy, suffocating attachment. Moving up, you pass through the animal and ghost realms, up to our human realm, a fragile middle ground of pleasure and pain. Higher still are the Deva realms, dimensions of light and immense sensory pleasure. But the journey doesn't stop there. Beyond the realms of form, at the very peak of the cosmos, are the Arupa Loka, the formless Brahma realms. Imagine a state of existence where you have no physical body, no sickness, no aging, no hunger, no rent to pay, no heartbreak. You exist purely as a point of infinite consciousness, floating in boundless space, boundless consciousness, and profound, undisturbed peace. The beings in these realms live for what the texts describe as 84,000 cosmic eons. They watch physical universes below them explode and collapse over and over, while they remain untouched in silent bliss. It sounds like the ultimate goal. It sounds like the heaven every religion promises. But here is the terrifying twist. Here is the ultimate cosmic trap that only the Buddha pointed out. Eventually, their time runs out. They fall. Why? Because even in a state of pure, formless bliss, they are still doing one thing. They are still holding on. They are attached to their own existence. They are attached to the peace. They still harbor the subtle, intangible thought of, I am. And because of that single microscopic seed of clinging, the gravity of the cosmos eventually pulls them back down into the lower realms to be born again. If I had to choose one word to describe that realization that even infinite heavenly bliss has an expiration date, for me, it is the word sobering. Just one word, sobering. If you are listening to this right now, I'm really curious what single word pops into your mind when you realize that even infinite heavenly bliss has an expiration date. Actually, if I'm being completely direct, I firmly believe that the human realm, this chaotic, painful, uncertain world we're living in right now, is vastly superior to those perfect, formless realms. A lot of people spend their whole lives praying to escape to a perfect heaven, but heaven is a trap of comfort. You cannot learn to let go when everything is perfect. You can only learn to let go when things are breaking. The cosmos itself is trying to tell us something. From the collapsing stars to the falling gods, the rule is written into the fabric of reality. You cannot outrun gravity by climbing higher into the universe. You cannot survive impermanence by clinging to existence. There is only one way out.
We just looked at the massive scale of the cosmos, the expanding galaxies, the collapsing stars, the gods falling from the highest realms. But to really understand why we suffer, why we hold on so tightly to things that hurt us, We have to go in the exact opposite direction. We have to zoom in, way in. Look at your hand right now. Touch the table in front of you. It feels solid. It feels heavy. It feels permanent. For centuries, human beings believed that matter was made of tiny, solid, unbreakable building blocks. We built our entire philosophy of life on the idea of solid ground. But then quantum mechanics came along and shattered our reality completely. When physicists peered deep into the atom, past the protons and the neutrons, they didn't find solid matter. They found a ghost town. Science tells us today that matter, everything you can touch, see, and hold, including your own physical heart, is 99.9999% empty space. Let that sink in for a second. You are almost entirely made of nothing. If I am completely honest, I strongly believe that modern quantum physics has done more to prove the ancient Eastern concept of non-self than any religious text ever could. I really don't see how anyone can study quantum mechanics and still believe in a permanent, solid identity. It is all right there under the microscope. But it gets much stranger. In that empty space, things aren't just sitting still. Physicists observe something called quantum fluctuation. Subatomic particles literally pop into existence out of the absolute void, exist for a fraction of a millisecond, and disappear back into nothingness. They flash into reality, and they vanish, over and over again. And if you try to catch them, if you try to measure them perfectly, you hit a wall. Werner Heisenberg's famous uncertainty principle proved mathematically that you can never know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a particle at the same time. The universe fundamentally refuses to be pinned down. It refuses to be captured. Thousands of years before Heisenberg, the ancient masters called this exact phenomenon Sunyata, emptiness. And from that profound emptiness comes Anatta, the illusion of the self. We suffer because we treat our thoughts, our relationships, our careers, and our identities like solid objects. We try to put a steel cage around a quantum fluctuation. We try to freeze something that is designed by the laws of physics to vibrate, change, and vanish. Think about water. If you gently cup your hands, you can hold water perfectly. It rests there, calm and clear. You can drink from it. You can appreciate it. But the moment you get anxious, the moment you let fear take over, the moment you squeeze your hands tightly to make sure you never lose it, what happens? It violently slips through your fingers. The harder you squeeze, the faster it escapes, and you are left with completely empty, shaking hands. The universe is exactly the same. The gravity of grasping destroys the very thing you're trying to hold. I have ruined things in my own life because of this exact mechanism. I have tried so hard to hold on to a situation, trying to control every variable out of fear of losing it until I squeezed the life out of it entirely. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's experienced that kind of self-sabotage. But looking at it through the lens of quantum mechanics, it makes me wonder, if everything inside us and around us is 99.9999% empty space, and the particles of our existence are constantly vanishing and reappearing, then what exactly is holding on to the anger from 5 years ago? Where does a traumatic memory actually live if the brain itself is mostly a vibrating void? I still haven't found a clear answer to that. Because if the universe is fundamentally empty and the quantum fields are constantly releasing everything, then the heaviness we feel in our chests, that unbearable weight of our memories, it isn't coming from the cosmos. It is being manufactured somewhere else entirely.
So, the Eastern masters observed the absolute emptiness of the quantum field long before microscopes existed. They saw that the universe is constantly dissolving. But what happened when the Western mind looked into the exact same abyss? Fast forward to mid-20th century Europe.
Picture Jean-Paul Sartre sitting in a smoky cafe in Paris, or Albert Camus staring out at the devastation of a post-war world. They didn't use the ancient word Sunyata. They didn't talk about quantum fluctuation, but they felt the exact same terrifying void. They looked at the universe and realized there is no inherent script, no solid ground to stand on. Camus called it the absurd. He compared human existence to the Greek myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned by the gods to roll a massive boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down, over and over and over again, forever. Does that sound familiar? It is the exact same cyclical trap the Buddha described in the expanding and contracting cosmos, the endless loop of building things up just to watch them fall apart. When most people realize that the universe is chaotic and out of their control, they panic. They feel what Sartre called nausea. They try to build thicker walls, buy more insurance, control their partners, and cling harder to their fleeting identities. But there is a secret doorway out of this panic, and to find it, we have to look even further back in Western history, to a man sitting in a war tent on the frozen frontiers of the Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, an emperor who could have anything he desired. Yet in his private journals, he wrote about the profound realization that he actually controlled absolutely nothing. He couldn't control the plague wiping out his people. He couldn't control the betrayals in his Senate. He couldn't even control the ticking clock of his own aging body. He realized that suffering wasn't caused by the chaos of the world. It was caused by his own mind, demanding that the world be something else. The Stoics had a specific formula for this, 2 words that hold the same explosive, liberating power as the concept of Roo Laew Waang. Amor Fati, a love of fate. Not just tolerating the chaos, not just passively enduring the pain, but aggressively, passionately embracing it. It is the radical decision to look at the absolute worst thing that has happened to you, the heartbreak, the failure, the loss, and say, I did not choose this, but I will love it as if I had asked for it, because it is the only reality that exists. I'm going to make a rather bold claim here. I am firmly convinced that mere acceptance is a complete myth. I don't think you can just passively accept a terrible tragedy or a deep betrayal. If you try to just tolerate it, you will secretly resent it. I believe you either completely embrace it through amor fati, or you let it slowly poison you. I really don't see a middle ground. But talking about this always brings up a profound contradiction that I still haven't found a definitive answer to. If you look at these 2 massive pillars of human thought, between the Eastern concept of completely letting go of all attachment and the Western Stoic concept of fiercely loving whatever happens to you, which one actually brings true peace? Is letting go the same thing as loving your fate? Or are they 2 completely different paths up the exact same mountain? It's a philosophical riddle that keeps me awake at night, and I would be genuinely fascinated to know how you balance those 2 ideas in your own life. Think about the sheer power of someone who operates this way. How do you defeat someone who loves the very obstacles you put in their path? How do you destroy a mind that looks at a collapsing universe and smiles? True freedom in both the East and the West begins the exact moment we stop demanding the universe to be solid. It happens when we stop squeezing the water in our hands. We are not victims of an expanding and contracting cosmos. We are the cosmos itself waking up, realizing it is made of empty space, and finally learning to dance with the chaos. But knowing this philosophically is the easy part. The real mystery is what happens when this cosmic theory collides with the messy biological reality of being human. What happens when the mind wants to let go, but the body absolutely refuses to? We know the universe is empty. We know letting go is the cosmic law. We can understand the math of a collapsing star and the philosophy of an ancient emperor. But try telling that to your heart when it is racing at 3 in the morning because of something someone said to you 5 years ago. There is a terrifying disconnect between what the mind understands and what the body remembers. Let's step out of the cosmos for a moment and look under your skin. What physically happens to your biology when you refuse to let go? When you hold a grudge or cling to a painful memory, you probably think it exists only in your mind, just a ghost floating in your thoughts. But your biology does not do ghosts. Your biology is a brutal, literal machine. Every single time you replay a betrayal, an alarm bell deep inside the temporal lobe of your brain, called the amygdala, fires. The amygdala is ancient. It does not speak English. It does not understand time. And most importantly, it does not know the difference between a memory of a threat and a physical lion standing right in front of you. When you refuse to let go of the past, your brain dumps cortisol and adrenaline straight into your bloodstream. Your blood vessels constrict, your heart rate spikes, your digestion completely stops. Your immune system shuts down because the body is stealing all available energy to prepare for a physical fight that is never, ever going to happen. In the medical world, there is a term for the silent damage this causes over time. It is called allostatic load. It is the physical wear and tear on your organs from chronic stress. It is the actual, measurable weight of your attachments. You are literally trading your cellular health, your life force, for the right to stay angry. This is something I realized not too long ago. I caught myself sitting alone, in a perfectly quiet, safe room, but I was clenching my jaw so hard my teeth actually hurt. I was doing it because I was replaying an old argument in my head where I felt I was treated unfairly. It's a very specific, exhausting kind of physical tension. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that exact bodily sensation, that feeling of physically bracing for an impact from a completely invisible memory. It is a strange realization when you catch your own body fighting a ghost. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, a brilliant neuroendocrinologist from Stanford University, wrote a fascinating book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. He spent years studying stress responses in the wild. Picture a zebra on the African savanna. A lion attacks. The zebra's stress response explodes. It runs for its absolute life, and by some miracle, it escapes. 3 minutes later, what is the zebra doing? It is peacefully eating grass. The stress response is completely gone. Its heart rate is normal. Animals let go of trauma immediately because their survival depends on it. They do not hold on. But human beings? We survive the lion, go back to our caves, and spend the next 20 years talking about the lion. We create a support group for lion survivors. We lie awake at night projecting scenarios of future lions. We do this through a highly evolved brain system called the default mode network. It is the human brain's internal time machine. It allows us to simulate the past and predict the future. It is the very reason we were able to build civilizations, compose symphonies, and split the atom. But it is also the reason we suffer more than any other creature on Earth. We take a momentary, fleeting event and loop it into an eternity of psychological torture. Looking at this evolutionary glitch, I cannot help but wonder why. If evolution is purely about the survival of the fittest, why did nature give us a brain that actively destroys its own immune system by holding on to things that are already over? Is this simply the inevitable, tragic price of high intelligence, or is this a biological mistake? I've read the evolutionary perspectives on this, but I am highly certain there are people listening right now who understand the deep mechanics of psychology and trauma far better than I do. I would be genuinely fascinated to hear your theories on this. Why are human beings the only animals that deliberately carry their cages with them? It feels almost hopeless. Our biology forces us to hold on. Our default mode network traps us in a loop. We are biologically hardwired to fail at letting go. But the human brain is not a static piece of meat. It is not a finished product. What if the act of observing this very pain can physically alter the architecture of your brain? What if letting go isn't just a nice spiritual metaphor, but a violent, literal, biological rewiring?
We just talked about how the brain traps us, how the amygdala fires and poisons the body with cortisol over a ghost of a memory. It sounds like a life sentence, doesn't it? Biology dictating destiny. But here is the secret that changes absolutely everything. The human brain is not a sculpture carved in stone. It is not a finished, solid object. It is a living, breathing architecture. For a very long time, the medical community believed that by the time you reached adulthood, your brain was fixed, the concrete had dried, and you were stuck with the neural pathways, the anxieties, and the resentments you had developed. But then, scientists started putting long-term mindfulness practitioners into functional MRI machines, and the images that came back on those screens completely shattered the old paradigm. There's a neuroscientist at Harvard Medical School named Dr. Sarah Lazar. She wasn't looking for mystical enlightenment or spiritual poetry. She was looking for cold, hard, quantifiable data. She took ordinary people who had never meditated before, put them through an 8-week mindfulness program, and scanned their brains before and after. Just 8 weeks. What she found on those scans is, in my opinion, one of the most profound discoveries in modern human history. The amygdala, that exact ancient alarm bell we just talked about, the physical epicenter of fear, trauma, and holding on to grudges, it physically shrank. It literally lost density. The physical tissue of their fear got smaller. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for executive control, rational perspective, and emotional regulation, it grew thicker. The gray matter actually expanded. Think about the sheer weight of what this actually means. Letting go is not just a beautiful, poetic, spiritual concept. It is a harsh, literal, biological process. It is neurological rewiring. When you sit in Vipassana or deep mindfulness, when you observe a painful memory rising up in your chest and you consciously choose not to react to it, you are not just finding peace. You are physically starving that neural pathway. You are initiating a biological mechanism called synaptic pruning. Like a gardener taking a pair of shears to a dead branch, you are physically cutting away the dead connections inside your own skull. If I have to be completely blunt here, I will just say it. I think the modern wellness industry has sold us a massive lie about what meditation and letting go actually are. They sell it as a way to just relax, to escape your stress, to take a break from the world. But looking at the raw neuroscience, I am absolutely convinced that is the wrong way to look at it. Meditation is not a spa treatment for your mind. It is a biological demolition site. It is the aggressive, physical tearing down of the architecture of your past traumas. I really do not see how it can just be called a relaxation tool when it literally alters the shape of your brain. But that is my firm stance looking at the clinical data. I am genuinely curious if you agree with this brutal view of it, or if you still feel that letting go is just a gentle emotional release. Because once you understand that the simple act of observing your own thoughts can physically restructure the gray matter inside your head, a terrifying and beautiful question emerges. Just how far can this neuroplasticity go? If 8 weeks of simple observation can shrink the fear center of a normal stressed-out person, what happens to a mind that is fundamentally broken? What happens to a brain completely consumed by severe trauma, unimaginable violence, and absolute darkness? Is there a point of no return? Or can even the most dangerous mind on earth physically rewire itself into a state of total, flawless perfection?
To test the absolute limits of this biological rewiring, we have to leave the modern laboratory. We have to look back into a dark, ancient forest. We usually hear this story as a fairy tale, a bedtime myth meant to teach children about the power of forgiveness. But if you strip away the mythology and look at it strictly through the lens of modern psychology, you are looking at one of the most extreme, violent cases of psychological reprogramming in the history of human consciousness. Imagine a man suffering from severe PTSD, pushed into a psychotic break by manipulation and betrayal. His real name was Ahimsaka, but history remembers him by a much darker name, Angulimala, the wearer of the finger garland. He was a serial killer. He did not just kill. he mutilated. He collected the fingers of his victims and wore them around his neck to keep count. If a modern psychiatrist examined him, they would not see a mythical demon. They would see a brain completely hijacked by the amygdala, a nervous system drowning in cortisol, bloodlust, and profound paranoia. His default mode network was stuck in an endless, terrifying loop of violence. He was a monster forged by deep psychological trauma. And then, one afternoon, a solitary monk walks directly into his forest. Angulimala draws his weapon and sprints after him. But something impossible happens. No matter how fast the killer runs, he cannot catch up to the monk, who is simply walking at a normal, steady pace. Frustrated, sweating, panting, the killer finally screams out, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha turns around, and he delivers a psychological strike so precise, it shatters his entire reality. He looks at him and says, "I have already stopped. It is you who have not." The Buddha was not talking about physical running. He was talking about the mind. He was talking about the endless cycle of violence, the clinging, the desperate grasping for control. He was holding up a mirror to the absolute exhaustion inside Angulimala's brain. In that split second, the trauma loop broke. The psychological architecture collapsed. Angulimala dropped his weapons, fell to his knees, and begged to be ordained. He became a monk. He achieved complete enlightenment. He successfully rewired his brain from a state of total psychopathy to absolute, boundless compassion. But here's the climax of the story that most people completely gloss over. The reality of the physical universe does not just vanish because you found inner peace. One morning, Angulimala is walking through a village barefoot, holding his bowl to collect alms. The villagers recognize him. These are the families of his victims. They do not see an enlightened master. They see the monster who slaughtered their children. They pick up stones, they pick up heavy sticks, and they attack him. They beat him relentlessly. His head is cracked open. His begging bowl is shattered into pieces. His robes are soaked in his own blood. When I think about this specific moment, I can't help but wonder, if this exact scenario happened today, in our modern world with our justice system, what would the ending be? If a known serial killer suddenly achieved true, genuine psychological rehabilitation and profound inner peace, would society ever accept it? Would we let him walk the streets? Or would we still demand his blood? Between absolute forgiveness and absolute justice, I honestly still haven't found a clear answer for myself on which one is ultimately more important for a society to function. It really makes you think. Bleeding, bruised, and completely shattered, Angulimala drags his broken body back to the monastery. The Buddha looks at him, and the Buddha does not perform a miracle to heal his wounds. He does not offer him pity. He looks at this bleeding man and tells him exactly what the universe demands. He says, "Bear it, Brahmin. You are experiencing here and now in this very life the ripening of karma that would have otherwise caused you to burn in hell for thousands of lifetimes. This is the absolute pinnacle of knowing and letting go." Angulimala knew the data. He knew his past actions had created this exact physical reality. And because he knew the truth of cause and effect, he accepted the physical pain without generating a single drop of psychological anger. The physical body was being destroyed by the past, but the mind had completely let go in the present. He proved the ultimate brutal truth of existence. Pain is mandatory. It is written into your biology and your history. But suffering? Suffering is always a choice.
We have explored the physics of empty space. We have looked at how the brain biologically rewires itself to escape trauma. But there is a line that science and philosophy often struggle to cross, a boundary where all the logic in the universe suddenly feels entirely useless. What happens when the thing the universe demands you let go of is someone you love? In 2005, the brilliant American writer Joan Didion published a book called The Year of Magical Thinking. It chronicled the sudden, devastating death of her husband. In it, she describes a phenomenon that almost every human being on Earth will eventually experience. After he died, she found herself completely unable to throw away his shoes. She knew, logically and medically, that he was gone, but a deeper, older part of her brain completely refused the data. She kept the shoes because she secretly believed that if he came back, he would need them. She called this magical thinking. It is the human mind's absolute refusal to accept sudden death. The brain creates an alternate reality because the actual reality is simply too heavy to bear. This is a very intimate, fragile space. I remember when I lost someone deeply close to me. I kept their phone number pinned to the top of my messages for years. Every time my phone vibrated, for just a fraction of a second, my brain tricked me into believing it was them. I knew it was biologically impossible, yet I held on to that digital ghost. I really don't know if anyone listening right now has ever experienced that exact kind of magical thinking. That strange, quiet moment where your logic completely surrenders to your grief. If you have ever caught yourself holding on to a pair of shoes or staring at an old phone number, knowing it makes absolutely no sense but you just can't stop, then you understand the deepest, most agonizing form of human attachment. And if you understand that, then you understand exactly what a woman named Kisa Gotami was feeling in northern India 2.5 millennia ago. Kisa Gotami was a young mother. Her first and only child, barely old enough to walk, suddenly fell ill and died. Joan Didion held on to a pair of shoes. Kisa Gotami held on to the body. She completely lost her mind. She strapped the lifeless, decaying body of her baby to her hip and began walking from house to house in her village, begging for medicine. People looked at her with horror. They mocked her. They told her the child was rotting. But her mind was locked in the ultimate state of magical thinking. She believed the boy was just sleeping. She believed she just hadn't found the right doctor yet. Eventually, a kind villager saw her profound psychological break and pointed her toward the forest. He told her there was a master there who had the exact medicine she was looking for. She runs to the Buddha. She falls at his feet, weeping, cradling the dead child, begging for the cure. Now pause and think about this. What would a normal religious leader do in this situation? They would probably give a comforting sermon. They would tell her about heaven. They would tell her that life is impermanent, that she needs to accept reality and let the child go. But the Buddha did absolutely none of that. He knew you cannot lecture a grieving mother. You cannot just command the human brain to let go of its deepest attachment. So he looked at her and said, "Yes, I can cure him. But to make the medicine, I need you to bring me a handful of mustard seeds." Kisa Gotami was overjoyed. Mustard seeds were the most common spice in India. Every house had them. She turned to run back to the village, but the Buddha raised his hand and gave her one absolute condition. He said, "The seeds must come from a house where no one has ever died. No father, no mother, no child, no servant. Find that house, bring me the seeds, and your child will live." She ran to the first house. They happily offered her a handful of mustard seeds, but before she took them, she asked, "Has anyone ever died in this house?" The woman at the door looked down and said, "Oh, Kisa, the living are few, but the dead are many. We just lost our grandfather last month." She went to the next house. "We lost a daughter." The next house, "We lost a servant." The next house, we lost a husband. She walked for hours, from sunrise to dusk, and with every door that opened, a microscopic piece of data entered her mind. With every story of grief she heard, the thick, heavy walls of her magical thinking began to crack. She did not find a single house untouched by death. By nightfall, she stood at the edge of the forest. The Buddha had not given her a philosophical lecture. He had forced her to go out and collect the raw data of human existence. And as she stood there in the dark, the data finally compiled into ultimate realization. Death was not a personal curse targeted at her. It was the fundamental, inescapable law of the cosmos. In that moment of absolute clarity, the biological mechanism in her brain shifted. She looked down at her arms, and for the first time, she did not see her sleeping baby. She saw a corpse. She carried the body to the cremation grounds, laid it gently in the woods, and walked back to the Buddha. Her mind was entirely quiet. This is the absolute core of Roo Laew Waang, knowing and letting go. You see, we always get the order wrong. We try to force ourselves to let go of things before we actually understand them. We tell ourselves to move on, to get over it, to stop caring. We try to use willpower to force the release. But Kisa Gotami's story reveals the ultimate psychological secret. You cannot force release. Release is merely a byproduct of complete realization. Roo must always precede Waang. You must know the truth completely. You must see the mechanics of reality so clearly that holding on suddenly becomes absurd. When you truly know that fire burns, you don't need willpower to drop the burning coal. Your hand opens on its own. But what happens when the fire isn't in your mind, but in your own flesh? What happens when the one facing death is not a grieving mother, but the master himself?
We have seen how a grieving mother had to face the brutal reality of death to finally let go of her child. We have seen how a serial killer used the laws of karma to let go of his own physical torture. But all of this leads us to one final, terrifying question. What happens when the ultimate architect of letting go faces his own physical destruction? We have this highly romanticized, almost cinematic image of enlightened masters. We picture them glowing, sitting on lotus flowers, floating inches above the ground, completely untouched by the dirt, disease, and decay of the normal world. We like to believe that if you just meditate hard enough, you get a free pass out of biological reality. But if you read the historical records of the Buddha's final days, specifically a text called the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, that fantasy is completely shattered. The text describes a man who is 80 years old. His back aches constantly. He literally tells his attendant Ananda that his body is like a worn-out, broken cart, barely held together by old leather straps. He is not a glowing deity. He is a fragile, aging mammal, subject to the exact same gravity that we are. And then comes the final meal. He accepts an offering from a metalworker named Kunda, a dish known in the ancient Pali language as Sukara Madhava. The exact translation is debated. Some say it was a type of toxic truffle, others say it was contaminated pork. But what happens next is not a myth. It is a violent medical emergency. Toxins flood his system. The ancient texts describe a sudden, explosive onset of severe dysentery, massive internal bleeding, and a piercing, excruciating physical pain that brought him to the absolute brink of death. Medical historians and gastroenterologists have studied the exact sequence of symptoms recorded in this text. Many modern physicians retrospectively diagnose the Buddha's fatal condition as mesenteric infarction. It is a catastrophic, irreversible blockage of blood supply to the intestines, leading to rapid tissue death, internal hemorrhaging, and a level of agony that is almost impossible to articulate.
Now, I'm looking at this purely from a historical and philosophical perspective, but I am absolutely certain there are doctors, surgeons, or medical students listening to this right now who understand the brutal clinical reality of this condition far better than I do. I would genuinely want to know, from a strict medical standpoint, what a human body actually goes through during a mesenteric infarction. Just how much physical shock and sheer pain is the nervous system trying to process in those final hours? Because the historical record tells us that despite his organs literally dying inside him, the Buddha stood up. He continued walking. Bleeding internally, severely dehydrated, he walks for miles under the scorching heat of the Indian sun. He finally collapses under a tree and begs Ananda for water. Ananda looks at the nearby stream and hesitates. 500 massive wooden carts had just rolled through the water, turning it into thick, churning mud. But the Buddha is in severe hypovolemic shock from blood loss. He demands the water. He drinks the mud. Why am I telling you these brutal, graphic details? Why strip away the beautiful golden statues and look at the blood and the mud? Because this is the ultimate, undeniable proof of what Roo Laew Waang actually means. This is where the quantum physics of empty space, the neurobiology of the brain, and the philosophy of the cosmos all converge into one single bloody moment. The Buddha's body was in absolute agony. His amygdala, his nervous system, his biology was screaming, but his mind was completely, terrifyingly silent. He proved the final equation of human existence. Pain is a biological mandate. It is the unavoidable reality of having a physical form. But suffering, the panic, the fear, the why is this happening to me, the desperate grasping for survival, that is entirely optional. That is psychology. He did not use a magic trick to numb the pain. He did not disassociate or float away into a trance. He felt every single microsecond of his tissue dying. He knew the pain completely, Roo, but he did not claim it as his own. He looked at the agony the exact same way a physicist looks at a subatomic particle flashing in and out of a vacuum. It was just a sensation. It was not him, Waang. He lay down between two sal trees. He did not fight the collapse of his own universe. He embraced it with the ultimate Amor Fati. He watched his own physical destruction with the exact same calm observation you would use to watch a leaf fall from a branch. He did not escape death. He simply stopped participating in it.
We hear these stories of ancient masters dying with a perfectly silent mind. We see the mechanics of the cosmos and the biology of the brain, and it is breathtaking. But if you are anything like me, there is a very loud, very cynical voice in the back of your head right now. A modern voice. It is saying, sure, that works if you live in a forest 2,000 years ago, but I have rent to pay. When people hear the concept of knowing and letting go, their immediate fear is one of emptiness. They look at this philosophy and think, if I let go of everything, if I stop holding on to my passions, my relationships, my ambitions, don't I just become a robot? Don't I just become a nihilist who doesn't care about anything? Let's be completely clear about what happens in the mind. There is a massive, dangerous difference between detachment and non-attachment. Detachment is a defense mechanism. It is apathy. It is building a thick concrete wall around your heart because you are too terrified of getting hurt. If I give you my most extreme, unfiltered opinion on this, I actually think a lot of people who proudly call themselves Stoic or Zen on the internet today are not enlightened at all. They are just emotionally unavailable. They use ancient philosophy as a shield to avoid genuine, vulnerable human connection. I really do not see the wisdom in becoming a block of ice. True non-attachment is the exact opposite of coldness. Think of a world-class trauma surgeon in a busy emergency room. When a patient is bleeding out on the table, that surgeon is not apathetic. They are hyper-focused. They are using every ounce of their skill, their passion, and their energy to save that life.
They care deeply. But if the patient flatlines, if the biological reality dictates that it is over, the surgeon does not collapse onto the floor in a puddle of despair. They do not throw away their scalpel and quit medicine forever. They wash their hands, they take a breath, and they walk into the next operating room. They know the stakes, they fight the battle, and then they completely let go of the result. They are deeply involved, but completely unbound. I will admit the first few times I tried to practice this in my own life, I failed miserably. I completely misunderstood the assignment. I started shutting down. I pushed people away, thinking that caring less was the secret to peace. I ended up just feeling entirely hollow. It wasn't until I understood that surgeon analogy that it finally clicked. It makes me wonder if anyone else has fallen into that exact same trap, trying so hard to let go that you accidentally just numb yourself to everything beautiful in your life. But then comes the ultimate practical question, the one that haunts the modern seeker. How do you do this when you are not a monk? How do you practice letting go when you have a 30-year mortgage, a demanding career, and a family that desperately depends on you? You cannot just sit under a tree and observe the quantum emptiness of the universe when your boss is screaming at you about a quarterly report. The ancient masters had a phrase for this specific paradox: be in the world, but not of it. You do not have to abandon your life to be free of it. The ultimate test of letting go is not sitting in a silent, peaceful cave. The ultimate test is sitting in a chaotic, high-stakes corporate boardroom. You put on the suit, you play the game, you negotiate the contract, you pay the mortgage, you strive for absolute excellence in your career. But, and this is the razor's edge, you never once confuse your net worth with your actual worth. You know that the spreadsheets, the titles, the corporate ladder, it is all 99.99% empty space. It is a quantum fluctuation. You play the game flawlessly, but you never forget that it is just a game. I look at this mostly from the perspective of history and philosophy, but I am absolutely certain that hidden among the listeners right now are people working in some of the most cutthroat, high-stress environments on Earth. Investment bankers, emergency room nurses, corporate lawyers. I know the ancient theory of being in the world but not of it, but I genuinely want to know how you actually do it. I'm sure there are deep, practical survival tactics for letting go in the middle of modern chaos that I haven't even considered. How do you walk through the fire of your career every single day without letting it burn your mind? Because if you can master that, if you can hold the heaviest responsibilities in the modern world with completely open hands, you have achieved something that even the gods in the highest formless realms could not do.
We have traveled from the vast expanding edges of the cosmos down into the microscopic gray matter of your brain and through the bloody final hours of ancient masters. But to truly understand how to practice this weightlessness in your daily life, we have to bring this entire journey full circle. We have to go back to the subatomic world. In quantum physics, there is a mystery that has baffled the greatest minds for over a century. It is demonstrated in the famous double-slit experiment. When scientists fire electrons through two slits without watching them, the electrons behave like a wave. They create an interference pattern behind them. They exist as a wave of infinite possibilities, passing through both slits at the exact same time. But the moment physicists place a detector, an observer, to watch which slit the electron actually goes through, the behavior completely changes. The electron stops acting like a wave. It collapses. It becomes a solid, localized particle. It chooses one path. The act of looking completely changes the behavior of reality. This is the observer effect. The universe fundamentally refuses to act the same way when it is being watched. And this is the exact secret weapon you have inside your own consciousness.
Think about what happens when you feel a heavy, overwhelming emotion. Let's say it is anxiety, deep sadness, or a sudden flare of rage. When that emotion hits, it feels like a massive tidal wave. It floods your mind, it drowns your logic, and it takes over your entire body. Why? Because you are reacting to it. You are telling yourself a story about it. You are asking, why am I feeling this? How do I make it stop? Who did this to me? You are fighting the wave, which only makes the wave bigger, noisier, and more terrifying. But what happens when you apply the observer effect? What happens when you practice Vipassana? You do not fight the anxiety. You do not try to suppress the anger or force yourself to feel happy. Instead, you turn your attention inward and you simply observe it. You look at the emotion the exact same way a physicist looks at a particle under a microscope. You strip away the story and you observe the raw physical data. You watch the tightness in your throat. You feel the heat radiating in your chest. You observe the pressure behind your eyes. You watch it without judgment. You do not call it bad. You do not call it good. You just observe. And the moment you do that, the quantum magic happens. Because you are observing it, the emotion can no longer exist as a wave. The wave of suffering collapses. It is no longer an all-consuming storm. It becomes just a tiny, harmless, localized particle of experience. It rises, it vibrates for a moment, and because you are not feeding it with your reaction, it naturally dissolves back into the empty space of your mind. You have collapsed the wave. If simply observing a thought or an emotion can completely change its physical structure, it begs a deeply unsettling, terrifying question. Who is the one doing the observing? Think about it. If you can observe your anxiety, then you are not your anxiety. If you can observe your thoughts, you cannot be your thoughts. If you can observe your physical body, you are not your body. So who or what is the actual observer sitting in the absolute silence behind your eyes? I have chased this question down every philosophical and scientific rabbit hole, and I still cannot find a satisfactory answer. Is the observer even real, or is it just another wave of probability waiting to collapse? I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that when you find that silent space of the observer, you have found the ultimate release. You have found the off switch to human suffering. The storm in your life does not have to stop. The universe does not have to become quiet. The waves will still rise, but you are no longer the one drowning in them. You are the one watching them dissolve.
Everything we have explored, from the unimaginable scale of the cosmos down to the microscopic synapses of your brain, converges into one single, inescapable truth. The universe is expanding, collapsing, and dying. Our stars are burning out. Our cells are constantly dying and regenerating, leaving you with a completely different physical body every few years. Your thoughts are flashing into existence and vanishing back into the void like quantum fluctuations. There is nothing in the entire fabric of reality that is standing still. Nothing. Yet we spend our entire lives trying to freeze the frame. We try to lock down our relationships, our youth, our careers, and our identities, and we wonder why we are exhausted. We wonder why our chests feel heavy. To hold on is to wage a silent, losing war against the very nature of existence. It is trying to stop a waterfall with your open palms. There is a beautiful story from the Thai forest tradition about a revered master named Ajahn Chah. He was sitting with a group of visitors, and he picked up a simple clay drinking glass. He held it up to the light and said, "You see this glass? To you, it is a beautiful cup. It holds my water. It reflects the light beautifully. If I tap it, it makes a lovely sound." He paused, looking at the glass in his hand, and continued, "But to me,
This glass is already broken. He looked at the confused faces of his students and explained, I know that one day the wind will knock it over, or my hand will slip and it will smash on the stone floor. Its nature is to break. And because I already see it as broken, every single moment I have with it right now is beautiful. I appreciate it, I drink from it, I enjoy its reflection. And when the day comes that it slips from my fingers and shatters, I do not scream, I do not mourn, I simply say, of course, the glass has done its job. This is the ultimate secret of a mind that has learned to let go. By accepting the end of things before they even happen, we do not become cold or apathetic. We do not stop loving. In fact, we finally learn how to love. We love fiercely, we appreciate deeply, and we live fully, because we are no longer terrified of the glass breaking. We enjoy the water while it is in our hands. If you are hearing my voice at this very moment, and the weight of everything we have shared has resonated with you, I want to ask you for just one single word. Choose one word that represents what you are finally ready to let go of today. For me, that word would be control. I am deeply curious to see what your word is. The path to peace is not about adding more weight. It is not about knowing more, achieving more, or carrying more. True knowledge doesn't weigh you down. True knowledge is the realization that there is nothing to carry. Thank you for walking this path with me today. May you all progress in the Dhamma. We look forward to seeing you on the next occasion.